Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to this podcast, Investing in Impact, Muslim Business and Community. My name is Omar DaCosta-Shahid, and I'll be your host today. Joining me are two fantastic guests who are leaders in their field. Arfah Farooq, founder of Muslim Techfest, the largest Muslim tech festival worldwide, and Muslamic Makers, a community of Muslim change makers in tech. And Dr. Tanvir Uddin, founder of Wholesum, a specialist global ethical short-term financing fund that supports small and medium-sized businesses grow, create jobs, and empower communities. Assalamu alaikum, guys. Welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Arfah, really good to have you.
Alhamdulillah.
Okay, I'm going to get straight into it. I want to start with a question for you, Dr. Tanvir. You've had a really eclectic background. You've had success in the corporate world. You've done a PhD. There's probably many doors that could have opened. Many things you could be doing. Why is it you're doing what you're doing? What problem are you trying to solve?
So at a very broad level, I wanted to do something meaningful with my whatever God-given talents I was able to accumulate, the resource and networks I was having access to. The question was, how can I have impact? Actually, I started my career working at a charity, and I increasingly, very, very quickly found out that the charity was a very difficult area to have scalable impact. They do some amazing work, and that's not a sort of a criticism of that. But I just felt like I could do something else. And when I returned to Australia after spending some time working in Islamic banking in the Middle East, I came across two big problems that I thought, gosh, no one else is solving them. Maybe I can do something about it at a very small scale level. And that was open up more investment opportunities, particularly for the Muslim community, away from things that everyone else is doing and that perhaps weren't solving their needs. So most people are investing in, say, stock market or property. The other thing was, as I studied in my PhD on microfinance and I did a lot of work with small businesses, I realized that there wasn't enough funding for small businesses. And I learned that small businesses are the backbone of any economy, whether you're in England or USA, Australia, or in Bangladesh or Pakistan. Small businesses make up the most of the economy, they create the most jobs, and there just wasn't enough funding going to them. So the aha moment was, could I create a fund that could help investors diversify, get some extra return, and then the capital can be allocated to the segments that really needed it. And so that's kind of accumulation of all those experiences coming together, alhamdulillah.
Got it. And what type of impact are you seeing at the moment with investing in smaller businesses? What type of change do you expect to see within economies and societies and so on?
Absolutely. Very, very significant, alhamdulillah. I'll just give two of the most recent investments we've made. One was into a Muslim-founded cybersecurity company that was scaling and already had some tier one companies, including some of the largest corporations in Australia. But they were facing a typical challenge that most small businesses face, which is they don't have excessive capital that's just sitting there they can use to make sure they can pay their staff wages, invest in growth and in product development. And that cycle is a constant challenge for any small business owner. We released a facility to them that now they're going to use to expand their marketing growth efforts. And with that, they're going to be able to hire more workers and grow their business in a sustainable manner whilst doing it through a very ethical financing line. The alternatives that they had in the market was, interest-bearing loans where whether they use it or not, they have to pay. Another business we invested into is installing energy-efficient solar units with solar and other efficient energy equipment to heat water for small businesses. And this business was in a constant struggle to be able to meet the orders for their customers. We provide a facility that's going to allow them to buy the units, install them, and pay their workers on time, and then focus on growth and expansion. And that has environmental benefits as well. So capital to businesses that are hungry for growth, and which are otherwise very stable, profitable, is going to have huge impact. And at the same time, great returns for our investors, alhamdulillah.
Got it. So there are many issues that our world currently has. We've all been exposed to the disaster, the genocide in Gaza. And that's just one among many disasters. Do you believe that the work that you're doing can contribute towards helping and solving some of these massive global issues that we're seeing?
Absolutely. If tomorrow, not even tomorrow, if say today, every single bank, every asset manager was to make the decision that we will no longer fund genocide or the extreme ravages of climate change or any activities related to modern slavery and poverty and repression, the world will be different literally tomorrow. any financial institution or business, no matter how big they are or how small they are, they need cash. That's the lifeblood of a capitalist society. So if we were to just allocate just 1% of the $145 trillion that's sitting with the largest asset managers and financial institutions, that would change societies in communities in any place in the world. So what we are trying to do is a very small at our scale, but if we can just move the needle in that effort, and that includes our Islamic financial institutions. I hate to say this, but one of the reasons I wasn't very excited about Islamic banking and finance in my early part of my career was because it seemed like the rich Muslims were making themselves richer by working with rich businesses, to put it in a very crude way. And I saw that a lot in the Middle East and in other parts of the Islamic world. Yeah. So we have a lot of work to do. And for me, this is the core of Islamic banking and finance. The philosophy is inclusivity, justice, allocating capital where it's going to have a purposeful difference, not just be profitable and ticking the Sharia compliance checkbox.
Got it. And Arfah, you've done something quite incredible just in the past year. You've grown Muslim Techfest. It's in London and in the States, and you're even thinking about, globally as well. For me, that's quite disruptive. I haven't really seen that before. What is it that you want to achieve? What type of impact would you like to have through Muslim Techfest?
So I think for us with Muslim Techfest, it's all about creating bridges between different kind of Muslim tech ecosystems around the world. And I think we definitely saw that when we went to San Francisco. Now there's a co-founder sitting in London and a co-founder sitting in San Francisco, and they're, building for good, building something together. And I think that really kind of enables kind of power. Let that be the exchange of skills or the exchange of funds or exchange of finance, whatever it is. All of a sudden, it's kind of creating that, I guess, contribute to that kind of circular economy. And really kind of building on that. I think for us, like really the vision really is that, inshallah, we have like 4 flagships events around the world in different parts. And then you really bring those local communities around.
There was a term that you used, circular economy, which some people may have heard of, some people may not. What does it mean to you?
So for me, the circular economy ultimately means, I guess it's almost related to actually how do we just keep investing and keeping that pound within us as a community. Other communities do that really, really, really well. With us, I think we're getting there. We're definitely getting better. We're a bit more conscious about actually, if I want this service, let me go find somebody who's from a Muslim background who can deliver the service, etc. instead. So I think really it's about really trying to kind of double down with that. And I think the really nice thing actually about kind of the Muslim Tech Fest that, alhamdulillah, we're like now into our 3rd year, is even the Muslim kind of tech businesses that kind of are working with us, we've seen them grow with us, which also has led to them also investing more with us as well. And I think that is so beautiful just to kind of see that they get it, they get the importance of it, they understand the value of it. And as they grow as a business, they're also a bit like, actually, we have a bit more cash to spare. So actually, let's keep trying to build together. And I think that really kind of, changes things.
Mm-hmm. And what is it, do you think, that has really grabbed people's attention with Muslim Techfest? Because you've sold out now. Every event has been very popular, and it's getting bigger and bigger. What is it that's grabbing people?
I think the biggest thing that's grabbing people when it comes to Muslim Techfest specifically is the Muslim part. And what I mean by that is that we've always been very unapologetically Muslim. And I think that work really stems from really back in the days of Muslamic Makers, which ultimately was the foundation of Muslim Techfest. And, Muslamic Makers has it 9 years now. It's took 9, if you really think about it, for people that don't know me and just see Muslim Techfest, they'll probably see it as an overnight success. But actually the real story is that, it's actually been 9 years of kind of seeding this ecosystem, building that kind of grassroots community, which has kind of led to, I guess, Muslim Techfest. Also, it's timing, right? I think timing always plays a critical part. Like the technology industry, especially now with AI and everything, and the enablement and the access to it as well. I think that all of a sudden, it's not, technology isn't seen as this elusive thing. Technology is just part of integration, as part of everyday life. It doesn't matter what industry you are, most likely whatever you're doing is tech enabled. So I think all of those things combines. I think it was very interesting going to America, and we delivered it in 2 months, and it was the most craziest turnaround. And I remember talking to American counterparts and just being like, I don't get it. We're these random Brits coming from the UK. You guys have been doing this stuff for a while. You guys have existing conferences. What is it that has allowed you to pay a higher ticket price, for these random people. And then they were like, it's the Muslim part. And again, I think there's probably an identity thing there as well, because I think British Muslim identity is very different from the American Muslim identity. But now what I'm hearing from a lot of the American Muslims is they really want to own that Muslim part. And I think that's really what made people pay attention.
Mm-hmm. So I think, we're living in a time where the resources are there. We have tech, we have the wealth, we have the talent. What is it that's not quite going right at the moment with the Muslim community coming together to really uplift our community, utilize our resources and finances in the right way, and really help the community grow and prosper and become more influential and so on? There's multiple things that are wrong, right? But from your thinking, Dr. Tanvir, what is it we need to do differently that we're not doing at the moment?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Whilst working in the ecosystem, we often look at it critically. We're trying to improve, trying to make it 100 times better. Things have moved significantly in the last couple of years, and definitely in the last decade, to further these collaborations in the ecosystem. So there's a lot to be excited and proud about. But the challenges that I see, probably threefold. One is that for years we've had a lot of distrust of organizations, institutions, key players within the Islamic community and with Muslim businesses that have either been on one extreme scams, or on the other extreme just not delivered proper services as you expect. So we're grappling with and dealing with it as a trust issue. The second thing is that a lot of the early first generation of Muslim entrepreneurs, founders, community change makers have for obvious reasons tried to solve near-term problems. So we need this service, we need to donate to charity, we need to build a masjid, we need some halal food, which are important survival initiatives. But now, I wasn't born in Bangladesh, but I came when I was very little, from Bangladesh to Australia. My parents migrated here, but I grew up and got the benefit of all their hard work. So I'm in a very privileged position in the sense that my parents have really laid the foundation for me to live in Australia, as of many other people. So what that means is that I'm not in the survival mode that my parents were in. I can sit back and have the luxury of studying about these issues or talking to people. I'm not trying to feed kids and pull down a blue collar job. So that means now we have the ability to think at a system level and infrastructure. And I think the third thing that's starting to happen and we need to do more of is actually take the time to understand beyond our sort of linear career paths. Say, I'm just a doctor. All I talk to is Muslim doctors or other doctors, or I'm an engineer or a lawyer. We're starting to think about what I have, how do I add value to another sector? How do I then take that benefit? And so that collaboration spaces is starting to happen. Obviously, conferences like that bring people together who are all interested in tech, but they're a diverse background. Places like Wholesum Club in London, which I'm learning a lot about. So those sort of spaces and conversations are starting to happen. And that's where the energy, the ideas, and that collaboration will naturally happen. So I'm positive, but yeah, there are some more work to be done.
So Dr. Tanvir mentioned collaboration 3 times. I think it's a really important theme to pick up on. What do you believe is missing at the moment in the Muslim community when it comes to collaboration? I think for me, there's an element of a scarcity mindset where people believe there's only so much wealth to go around when, we know that Allah has limitless, resources and wealth to give us. But what do you think needs to be done to enhance that collaboration in the Muslim community in order to work together and make further change?
I think just to follow on the point about the scarcity mindset, so the thing when we went on the San Francisco trip, abundance mindset became literally the terminology of every pretty much tech person that went there, and they really took that mindset from San Francisco, because San Francisco, generally speaking, I'm just talking in a secular sense, really kind of has that of there's just ample amount of opportunity, you just go for it, etc. And again, in the British thing, we generally in British culture, we can be a bit more conservative. Add the Muslim element to it, right? But then actually, if you do think of it, right, like you said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, anything is possible, right? Even the surah and all of that stuff, Surah Al-Qadr, the abundance, right? Like all of that side of things, it's one of those things which even myself, where sometimes I find myself falling into a scarcity mindset, I have to sometimes take a step back and, be like, wait, it's fine. got to remember your intentions, and your intentions definitely will always carry you through. And I think intentions and abundance, I think if you can really kind of really shift yourself and move into that mindset, I think that helps. Then I think on a system level, I think really it is just about, unfortunately, it does happen a lot in our community where people will, see something going well and then they'll go off and like try to do it because they see it. I mean, we've seen it. We've seen a few copycats appear in America, and it's a bit
always,
like,
yeah,
as always. Yeah. And there was one recently which even sounded very similar to our name, and it was a bit like, okay, we don't mind you doing a thing, we're only going to get there once a year, but when it's even like very similar in your name, it's kind of, it gets a bit sticky. Do you think
they should be called out, these copycats?
I think, you know what, I think it's always about how people approach it. I have mad respect for people that approach me and say, I'm thinking about this. I know you're already doing it. Is there a collaboration opportunity, or is there something you can support with me? And a really key example of that is somebody at Muslim Techfest. He came all the way from South Africa, loved what we were doing. And he's like, we have a couple of like Telegram groups, but we haven't really ever done anything properly in person. I sat down with him. I was like, look, this is how we ran it. These are the considerations when it comes to speakers. It's like, alhamdulillah, like that led to them founding Tech, and they've now got this like Tech community in South Africa, and they did like 100-person like conference and stuff. It's like, for me, I don't mind, because for me it's like, maybe South Africa might happen for us 2 years down the road. It might not. So I shouldn't also hold back and be like, oh, I don't want them to do that, because at the same time, I can't be everywhere either. So I think it's really about how things are approached. So I think when it comes to things like collaboration, if you do have a similar idea, or you do know somebody's already similarly doing it, that I feel like the best thing you can do is at least approach them or give them the common courtesy. The most annoying thing is when you don't get that courtesy, and then it just kind of comes out of nowhere, or somebody sends you this thing being like, oh, are you guys doing that thing? And you're like, that's not my thing, That's the thing that I think I find quite jarring. But I think like even with Muslim Techfest, like we've always tried to have this kind of approach of like, there's so many amazing like grassroots communities here in the UK that are really the heartbeat, Muslamic makers, home club, Dean developers, all these other communities, they're really the heartbeat, right? So even when we're doing like Muslim Techfest, it's like, cool, become a community partner. We give them an opportunity to pitch, to have a workshop or a roundtable or whatever at the festival, right? Giving them also an opportunity to be a part of the programming if they choose fit and stuff. And I think just trying to design things in that kind of way, I think kind of really, really helps. Like, like Muslim Techfest obviously has global ambitions, but for us, it's always really important to remember our roots. Alhamdulillah, inshallah, if Muslim Techfest gets to where it needs to, then we can give back, not just in, hey, come be a part of the festival, but these grassroots communities, mine including, which is why Muslim Techfest is now being built the way it is, always struggle with money.
Yeah, are these workshops only for people in tech, or is it wider than that? Well,
we always try to keep it wider. It kind of varies. So like an example would be like Tech Sisters and Muslim Women Connect. They're doing a more of a soft skills workshop in terms of like how to speak up, how to unmute yourself and stuff. Whereas, Redwood Founders, they're doing one on kind of the student-led revolution in terms of building founders. That's their speciality. Like that's what they do. So it's always about, again, working very curating things properly and so on. And that's obviously our speciality, to be like, we know what our programming is, we kind of know what boxes we're playing in, but at the same time we're like, is this complementary and can it work? And actually if we can bring in certain people, then why not? Because that only boosts them. And then I think, like I said, with these grassroots communities, they do so much work. Me and my co-founder Zahid were just talking about, like, even the Muslamic makers, right? The struggle to find somebody to pay the £200 pizza bill, right? Yep. Just because, like it sounds ridiculous, but the amount of stress just to get somebody to pay the £200, it's like, God, what if we could actually build an institution like MTF or whatever it is, that actually every year we have a little grant fund where we can just throw a bit of money at these, because we wouldn't be who we are without these grassroots communities. And I think it's really about thinking things like that as well.
So I want to just sort of, I talked a lot about collaboration, but I want to kind of provide a little bit of a qualifier to the importance of collaboration, which is, whilst we want to collaborate and we should always try and find out who's doing what and actually have the courtesy, as Arfah mentioned, I think the other thing as well is we need to I think I kind of mentioned this about thinking about systems change and working at a macro level and not just solving that short-term problem. So I think sometimes when we are collaborating, we also got to find the right collaborators. It's easy to go and just do the exact same thing that someone else has done. And I mean, you think about some of the sectors where this is a big problem, charities. Everyone almost starts a charity every other day. And if you look at the data, I haven't looked at the UK data. In Australia, you've got we've got the big four, and then you've got a long tail of small charities really raising only a few $100,000. And honestly, they just shouldn't exist, in my view. And I'm being very contentious there. And no one should back them. And simply reason being is they're doing exactly the same thing. And so in terms of if someone came out and says, okay, I want to do something for the charity sector, when they try and collaborate, the big ones sometimes feel like you're encroaching in their turf, and the small ones feel very founder egoistic, and they don't want to do that. So sometimes in that space, and if that's what you're really passionate, want to make a difference, sometimes the collaboration might not be with the typical people. It might be with people who are outside the sector who really want to make a change. And you've got to think about what's your authenticity then. What are you really trying to do? So I think that we've got to think at a much broader and grander level, and not just like, okay, I just want to do another thing that everyone else is doing. And I think that, like, obviously I have a lot of respect for Arfah and the work that's doing, is because it's bringing people who have a different mindset. They're not just about doing it the old way. They're about finding new innovative ways. And we need to create those spaces that are challenging the status quo.
I'm actually interested in knowing, for example, in Wholesum, whether the appetite among Muslim women or women is equal to that of men, or it's less, and likewise with Arfah. What are you seeing in the Muslim female entrepreneur space? Are you seeing it rise? I'm sure you would have inspired some Muslim women to set up their own businesses. It's a question for both of you. What are you seeing in terms of Muslim investing among women, and also is there a rise in Muslim entrepreneurs who are women that we're seeing as well?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a rise. I still think there's a lot of work to be done, but I think that it's getting there. I think definitely in the sense of now that I feel like, again, it's accessibility, right? The tools are at your disposal, right? There's no excuse to not build an MVP because you can build one tomorrow using kind of no code and prompt engineering. So I think because of that, I feel like there's a much more like appetite. I'm starting to see, like, again, Muslim women in my group, like, pushing out MVPs, and I've never really used to see that before, right? And I think it's so great to kind of see that. And I think in the investing space, again, I think generally speaking, the investing space can be kind of super kind of male dominated. And but again, being conscious of how we go about doing that, etc. Because traditionally, I was talking to someone else recently about this. I think traditionally, women actually either sit on savings, or it's very kind of low, kind of low risk kind of investments. But actually, it's like, how do we educate them to kind of be that? But on the flip side, if you really think about in a traditional manner, I think about my mother and I think about the committee, when you would literally, they would pull the money together in the neighborhood and then the money would get circulated. So then it's really fascinating as well to be like...
That's missing today, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. And now there's there's an app called Bloom, and there's tech-enabled things that do that as well now, kind of almost bringing that tradition back to life and stuff. And I just think, again, like, even thinking about something like the committee, why was it so successful? It was community and accountability. It was people you knew that you trust and you were creating these money circles with, and that money was kind of like being saved. And that was literally women. It was women doing that, taking their husband's monies or savings or whatever it was to actually, kind of pull that money and be like, okay, my committee isn't due in 6 months, so now I can get the kitchen sorted or whatever it is. Yeah. So I always find that really kind of super fascinating as well.
And just, I'm interested also in the role of money and influence. Do we think that as a community we need to be striving for more wealth? And in turn, the idea would be that wealth would create influence and impact. I think there is a mindset among some Muslims that wealth isn't actually that important. And that's kind of a dunya type of thing to aspire for. So where do you stand when it comes to kind of generating wealth and what that can do for the community?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, those perceptions exist. The unfortunate thing is, I think that there's a focus on quantum. it's to focus on the material aspect of wealth. And I think it's right. You talk about influence and impact. So there's far more dimensions to money and how it's used. So we think about it as Muslims, how you earn money, how you spend money, how you save money, how you spend money, in terms of also, the allocation of investments. So I think if we think about that broad sense, it's not so much about the money itself, but what it can unlock. Now, in terms of from our perspective, as Wholesum, we have found that our product has been very beneficial for certain, segments of society that have previously not been targeted or been sort of encouraged and educated about money management. And women are definitely one key part of it. And that's because they can tend to be a little bit more risk averse. But they also haven't been exposed to financial literacy in the same way. I remember I delivered a workshop on basic finance topics, and I had 3 young sisters come speak to me afterwards, and they had just graduated and they're starting their first jobs, and said to me, Tanvir, would like to buy our first ETFs. And so for those who don't know, ETFs, exchange traded funds, are a very simple investment product you can buy, which has a diverse range of company stocks, typically, they're high cap stocks, already built into that product. And they're asking me where can they buy them and what are some options for some brokerages. And that to me was like, this is empowerment. We're giving knowledge to empower women who can use their money to invest. And so I think that that is key. And it's not simply, I'm just making money and becoming wealthy, but it's giving them independence. It's giving them the ability to drive choices. And yes, a lot more women, and this is not just in the Muslim community, research has found women care more about society and where their money is going and where it's being invested than men have traditionally been. And we're seeing a massive wealth transfer from the baby boomer generation to Generation X, millennials, and Gen Z, and now Alpha Beta generations. And they care about their money in a different way. And so I think it's a miss if we're not empowering our women and helping them with that. And ultimately, they tend to invest more into their families and to the society. So I think, wealth is absolutely important. It's, I think, a question of purpose and how it's being accumulated and where it's being spent. I don't think we should apply any restrictions to that. It's just more about providing more options. I think this is what we need.
But let's say there'll be plenty of Muslim women out there, perhaps from working class backgrounds, underprivileged, backgrounds. Where do they get started when it comes to investing if they don't have the capital, they don't have 10, 15, 20,000 pounds to invest? It seems like a lot of, investment platforms, the bar is quite high. Often you have to be a sophisticated investor and so on. So where can your kind of, your Muslim woman who doesn't have huge funds, where can they start and what can they do with that money?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the first starting point is building good savings habits. So, most financial advisors talk about an 80-20 rule, which is you try and put aside 20% of your income. Assume that if you're getting 100 pounds in your pay packet, assume it's only 80 pounds. You put it aside. You build that savings habit, start building some budgeting strategies. How much do I allocate for transport, food, going out, entertainment, whatever it might be. And that's actually very key because, an author I really respect, and I'm finishing his book at the moment, Morgan Housel's Psychology of Money, talks about savings should be a habit for everyone, regardless of who you are, because you just don't know. And as part of our own understanding of tawakkul is also that you prepare for the future and not just live it up because you're thinking it's going to be fine. So that's number one. Number two is then thinking about what are some safe short-term savings avenues. They don't take a lot. There might be Islamic banks, there might be short-term Islamic funds that have very low barriers to entry, and it's fairly secure, and it provides a small return, but it also is what's called liquid, which means that I can get my money back at a really short period of time. And it's not very volatile like stock market or cryptocurrencies, which have, daily pricing.
Could you name a few funds?
Yeah, sure. There are some crowdfunding platforms in the UK. You have Cardus, you have Beehive in the Middle East, you have Capital Boost. And so these platforms are very short-term investing. There might be a few months, it might be 30, 60 days, and allows you to invest. And then that is what we call fixed income or short-term investing because it's a very stable, the returns are lower, but they allow you to get your money back quickly. And then as part of your ongoing diversification strategy, it's really important to consider about markets like the stock market, where you can invest typically for a longer time horizon, but the entry barrier is very low. You can use a brokerage like Robinhood. In Australia with Hello Stake, and then there's many others I'm sure in the UK. where you can just start with a few dollars. And that is a little bit more risky, but they're more longer term strategies. So like the US stock market has returned 1,700 fold in the last 100 years or so. I mean, the numbers might be a bit off, but it's phenomenal. And it just allows you to, goes through booms and bust cycles. And so now you're starting to get the experience. You've got a bit of long-term investing, sort of short-term investing. And within a few years, you'll start to build a sizable portfolio. Then you can start accessing private assets, private equity, investment funds like us. I mean, we're still a bit restrictive. We're for accredited investors. You got Islamic Finance Guru is also for accredited investors. But you can enter that. It's not, I mean, it seems like an insurmountable, but some very basic habits over time get you there. People think I've been investing for a long time. My investing journey has only been 5 years, and I'm well into my 30s. And that's because I didn't have knowledge, and it took me to do a master's degree in finance to learn about this, but it shouldn't have to be. If you are in your early 20s, you just graduated, a little bit aside will compound. And subhanAllah, there is barakah in that. It just comes from those habits.
Yep. And Arfah, are there any workshops that you've done or you're planning to do when it comes to helping Muslims with investment or Muslim women with investment and so on?
Yeah, so actually at Techfest this year, Islamic Finance Guru are doing a workshop where you will literally walk away with your own personal finance plan. So you can literally, like within 45 minutes to an hour, you'll literally walk away with a plan. So you can actually just get going. Because exactly as you said, like I've only really started investing a couple of years ago, so late 20s really. And I think that was probably just off the back of my younger brother who was in his early 20s. And I kind of saw like what he was doing and how he was making money, losing money, and all the things in between. And then that's what kind of really kind of started to kind of pique my interest. And then on the flip side, I remember when I was in my 20s, I remember my like staff colleagues at that point, they were buying Tesla. Not that I would support that just yet now with Elon. But now I think back on it, I'm like, oh, if only I investigated back then, or whatever other stocks that they were, right? Because that was 10 years ago. And now I'm just like, oh, like what was, and I think I did, but it just felt so complicated. Like I remember like trying to look into it and then it felt so complicated. It just felt like this massive barrier. And now I'm like, okay, there's so many kind of like, again, different platforms, right? Even in the Islamic economy, you've obviously got Wahid's very easy kind of entry, and the IFG for more accredited. You've got Nesta, which is more property, etc. And then, you've got other kind of money management apps like Kestrel. So even in the Islamic economy, we've got amazing Muslim products that are like starting to boom and starting to actually like, educate. I've got a friend, her name is Anisa. She's actually just launched Ida Invest, which is very targeted towards Muslim women. And then there's DJ Money, again, another Muslim woman founder in the Middle East. The product's launched in Saudi, where they're trying to educate actually there, because what's really interesting there, I was listening to her on a podcast recently, and she was talking about doing a workshop and these women being like, I don't really need to think about money. I kind of have everything. I have this good job, etc. But what she realized is when she gave them the tools, they actually use that money then to actually invest back in charity, exactly going back into your point. So again, even the people that are super privileged, they almost need a sense of meaning on what to do with that money. So actually education, regardless of where you are on the spectrum, is so important. And I think it really goes down to the earlier question you said about like money and it always being tied to kind of dunya in that sense. And I think even for myself, like I look on my business journey and I look at how I was just so fixated on community and not actually like realizing the importance of money in one, building the right infrastructure. So that's why with like Muslim Techfest, it's almost like my learnings from like having a very kind of single kind of mindset that was always that always didn't think about money, to now being like, no, this thing has to be built with money. It has to have we have to charge, understanding my own value, understanding the product's value, and building with that, because infrastructure is key. And I think where we've often gone wrong in kind of the Muslim space is that we don't think about money. Amazing projects boom. We're not thinking about money. We're not thinking about sustainability. 5 years down the line, the things goes bust. You don't have the energy to run it. Then, 2 years later, the same thing, somebody else is starting again. And it's just this like constant, you think about how much resource just gets wasted, right? Yeah. Ideas, people, etc., just because we're not even just thinking about the bare basic. I think about Muslamic makers, right? Muslamic makers was always very like, free events, it's always going to be free, etc. I mean, now I think back on it, I'm like, why did I just not charge? Because that would have just provided for the pizza and it would have just thingy it. But I was so fixated thinking that people wouldn't be able to like want to pay £5 to £10. Now I've got people paying £150 for Muslim Techfest. So all of a sudden, like, can you imagine my mindset's literally gone from not even wanting to charge £5 to now actually having the confidence. Albeit obviously Muslim Techfest is a slightly different kind of proposition, but I think the point stands that I used to be so scared of just charging, you know, and the way that money in a sense has empowered me. One, empowered me to actually go full time on Muslim Techfest, which I have not been able to do of 9 years of like Muslamic building the Muslamic makers. Being able to do that and also understanding the privilege, and I think privilege is a really, really important thing for me, because even when I was making that decision to go full time on Muslim Techfest, it was like sitting down with my husband being like, right, can we cover the bills? Can we do this? Can we do that? Understanding actually, yeah, we can. Alhamdulillah, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has actually given me that privilege to actually take that slight risk, take that kind of hit to whatever it is to kind of build for the community, but also at the same time then be able to obviously kind of earn back, then it actually, there's some barakah here that I'm basically missing. And I think that was really kind of the push of being able to kind of do that.
Yeah. So
can I just pick up on the sustainability point? Because I think it's really important stressing, and Arfah's talked about it both sort of in her personal and sort of organization level. As individuals, but also at institutional levels, if we do not build sustainability in our plans, things are going to fail and a lot of resources will be wasted. I know so many Muslim charities, masajid, Islamic schools sitting on piles and piles of money. Basically, they are subsidizing the banks, right? Because they're not earning anything if they want to avoid riba. And if at best they're earning very low returns. And then they're losing value to inflation, because if we don't invest and generate a return above the inflation rate, we're losing the purchasing power. As a community, this is not a small amount. We did an analysis for just the Australian Muslims. We're about 1 million Muslims, and we took a conservative assumptions. We calculated $150 to $200 million is the donation the Australian Muslim community makes to the Australian banking system. That's a lot of money. And it just comes from the fact that our leaders, our trustees in charities and organizations do not even understand the basics of investing in inflation. And they're sitting, I met with a large charity literally in the last couple of days who's sitting on millions of pounds, and they've basically been doing that for years. At an individual level, just to explain how liberating it can be, when I got married and my wife moved up to Sydney from Melbourne, I was asking her, what are you doing with your money? Because I'm like, I want to make sure that you're looking after yourself. And she had, I think, about 30,000 Australian dollars. And she saved up for a few years of working. And she put it straight into an ETF through a broker in her name. And it's been doing about 10, 15%. She doesn't even touch it. She doesn't even look at it. It's just compounding, simple Warren Buffett strategy, compound over time. We found some Islamic ETFs, we put into that. And she doesn't worry about it's growing over time. It's money that would have sat there and she might have spent it. I mean, that liberation from just a small decision just shows that it's not rocket science. I mean, the finance world and people, I mean, I'm at blame for this in our sector, that we make it hard. And Islamic finance, we add a lot of Arabic terminology, make it even more complicated. It doesn't have to be. But these small decisions can go a long way. And just to finish that point, I met with a small Muslim charity in Singapore. So Singapore already has a small Muslim minority, and they have a community for new converts called the Muslim Converts Association of Singapore. Only about 20, 25 years ago, they started. So a niche within a niche, they're sitting on a $50 million Al-Kaf. And Al-Kaf is the hidden strategy. It's become hidden because we don't talk about it and we're not investing into it.
What is Al-Kaf?
Al-Kaf is essentially an endowment. Muslims were pioneers of endowments. Oxford, Harvard, all these institutions have now endowments that have built on the legal base of the Ottoman Al-Kaf law, which essentially is a perpetual endowment. You don't touch the corpus of the capital. It gets reinvested, and a part of the profit proceeds are going towards charitable causes or for social purpose. I mean, you can even create a family Al-Kaf, which is just to benefit children and grandchildren. That is such a simple thing to set up. And again, you don't need Al-Kaf of millions. You can start it with just a few $1,000s, a few £100 even. But that is the superpower that charged our communities through centuries. And yet we, for some reason, have stopped doing it. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why charities and mosques and schools and individuals are not setting up more Al-Kaf.
Yeah. So tell me kind of the mindset that Muslims should have when it comes to money, because we've been talking about investment, talking about money, wealth, business. For most people, we divorce this from our spirituality and our journey to God. I've a project called the Spirituality Business, which is about that vertical alignment of how our business and our wealth is actually a path to God. So what type of mindset, what type of journey should we be on when we're thinking about these things? But I'll start with the question, actually. What is money? Like, what's your thoughts on how do we define money? What is it?
Very philosophical question. Okay, I mean, look, there's obviously many ways you can skin that cat, but essentially, if we go back to the three purposes of money that Imam Ghazali expounded in his writings, one was that it's a store of value, it's a medium of exchange, and it's in a way to catalyze some business activity. I think I got the third one right, but we might need a fact checker on that one.
Check it,
but if we go back to the first two purposes, that we need to put something of value aside, because we're not going to earn everything in one day and spend everything in one day. And that's because we prepare for, and this is part of our faith, which is we prepare for things can go wrong. My car might break down. I might be unwell and I can't work. So money needs to enable that. And it has to be something that has intrinsic value. Unfortunately, we are in a world of fractional reserve banking where money can be converted into many-fold over simply by printing it, or a bank will provide a loan, or it's fiat currency because the central bank basically, or through legal tender, says it has value. But we know that becomes worthless through inflation. So having intrinsic value is one. The second thing, as a medium of exchange, is really important, because we need to be able to agree on what the exchange should be. So within those two concepts that I've just expressed from Ghazali, we can understand some very fundamental Islamic values, which is there is transparency, there is that we're not kind of manipulating prices, or we're not manipulating what something's worth. And at the end of the day, it just comes to those significant fundamental values, which is that there's honesty in our understanding, and we're not trying to rip someone off. And I mean, you've written a lot and talked a lot about exchange, but I think money, if it's facilitating honest exchange between parties, and it allows for the value to hold itself, then that is valuable. But of course, I know we live in a world where money isn't valued necessarily by that. And, we talk about gold and other currencies and cryptocurrencies participating a role. But I think regardless of, let's not get doom and gloom and say we can't change the fractional reserve banking world. We can't. But at least on a day-to-day basis, where I invest, who I exchange with, am I being fair with them? That is creating change. And that is having an impact on the person at least I'm dealing with. And let's not belittle that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be accountable for that. No one's going to say, why haven't you changed the fractional reserve banking system? If you're at least exchanging honestly with the people around you.
I think Tanvir has picked up on some of the core fundamental concepts within our faith as to how we should perceive engaging with people, dealing with money, engaging in business. What do you feel are some of the kind of spiritual, ethical values which you believe are missing and you would like to see more of Muslims engaging with?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. So I think it is definitely one of those things of like paying people on time, and sometimes it's just the bare basic things as well. And I get it as well. And I think it's something that I've obviously become super conscious of as a business owner as well. When the invoice lands, like actually trying to make sure you do pay within the timeline that they've given you, ideally before, even if kind of cash flow allows, right? So I think those kind of small things, I think, is definitely one of those things. And also just like, yeah, I think that for me, I think is sometimes, again, just a very basic thing that often just gets missed. And I think even if we can just build that good habit, then I think that can also make a good change.
Yeah. And Dr. You mentioned cryptocurrency. It's quite a controversial topic in the Muslim community. Some say it's permissible, some say it's not permissible. How does a Muslim go about thinking about this issue, and where do they go for information to learn about cryptocurrency and whether they should be doing it? What's your perspective on that?
Sure. Look, I'm not a Sharia scholar, so and you're right. Like there are some differences of opinion. Some very reputable scholars have allowed cryptocurrency exchanging and investing through that. So I don't want to take anything away from that sort of discussion. But what I want to kind of talk about are sort of separating two things. So separating the technology of blockchain, which enables cryptocurrencies, and a host of other things like smart contracts, where you can come to agreements and facilitate.
These are going to be terms that many people haven't heard of. So let's start with the blockchain.
Yeah,
what is the blockchain?
Absolutely. So blockchain is essentially a system. If you think about it as a ledger, where I can record activities. Now, obviously, it's being coded through essentially computer bits and so forth, but essentially it's a way to record transactions and activities and data about, let's put it simply, a money transfer. I'm sending you $10. Now, that ledger that's recording that is completely decentralized, so that no one party can control that. And the value cannot be set by any one party, as it might be, say, with fiat currency, which is simply money that's legal tender. The government says it's the value. Now, if blockchain can enable a decentralized recording of transactions and data, it has a lot of applications, including cryptocurrencies and smart contracts. Smart contracts being where you can deliver exchange of information. Maybe, for example, you're an agricultural supplier. You want a smart contract to quickly enable the valuation of your commodity that you're selling, and someone's going to buy it, and there's going to be a contract for the transfer of the physical goods. In the realm of cryptocurrency, so the currency is not determined as you would with normal paper currency, but what it means is that now you can break up a one, say, Bitcoin, which is the most common cryptocurrency, into smaller bits. You can buy and trade things just with normal money, but no one dictates the value, so he holds it. The interesting application of that is tokenization. And I'm introducing another term, but the idea is that if I can, something that's tangible, let's say I'm going to invest in the production of these tables, I'm going to now be able to break it up, the value of it, into a digital currency, which might be any of these cryptocurrencies, and someone in a remote part of the world can participate in that. They don't need to go through a complicated process of signing up, submitting a form. They might not meet the minimum requirements. We talked about that for some of these investment strategies. So it has an application which is actually very empowering. So one of my friends, who's married to your friend Anissa, Daniel, who's a co-founder of Facet, is developing on the blockchain using tokenization of assets. It could be like a real estate project. It could be even a fund like us, and allowing someone from remote part of Turkey or Indonesia to participate in that, which is inclusive, it's democratizing. That part of the technology I'm very excited about. Now, the big caveat is, if we're investing in cryptocurrency because I'm riding a wave and there's a bubble, I want to take advantage of that short-term opportunity where someone down the road is going to value the Bitcoin more than I value it today. I'm going to make a quick buck. The question I ask and I think about is two things. One is, what is my intention here? And number two, what is the purpose that my money, or what has my money catalyzed in the real world? If it's a speculative investment, I would question that intention, and I'd question, what is the opportunity that a person is missing out on? That if I'm simply buying from Omar to sell to Arfah, then it's just a movement of money. But if I'm investing into a new affordable housing project, or I'm investing into a small business, that money is catalytic. And we go back to Rasulullah's time when they went on caravan trips, and the business, the funders in amongst the Quraysh funded the caravan rides. The money is enabling those traders to go to Bilad al-Sham and bring back goods that are going to be sold in the market. There's an exchange of goods of value. So people might need products that are not available in Mecca, but they are available up north. And secondly, those people who have facilitated trade, they've got jobs, they're earning a livelihood. And I think that there is a bigger economy out there that needs resources. I mean, in my sector of small businesses, the World Bank has estimated a $5.9 trillion funding gap. When we have these opportunities, we have the entrepreneurs that Arfah is working with, initiatives like Muslim Techfest. Why would you want to invest in cryptocurrencies? It just beguiles me. So that's my controversial point about cryptocurrencies. I'm not talking about the halal
people
haramness
like
of it.
Haris Irfan are massive proponents of Bitcoin and so on. You know, he says that, you know, obviously it's decentralized, it's inflation proof, it's going to be the thing which could revolutionize our economy if it was utilized properly and were to really get behind it. But just on that, what to you is a authentic Islamic economy? What does that look like, and what should we be doing to contribute towards that?
I mean, I'm keen for our fast thoughts as well, but I think essentially it's tangible, it's real. You can see it, you can feel it. It's making a difference in people's lives. That was the cornerstone of business in the Islamic world for years. You went to a shop, you could see the product defects were disclosed, you exchanged in real value, and it was a partnership. Both the business owners are partners, the exchange with another person was partnership. I think we need to kind of go back to that kind of very core aspect of business. So now, of course, we are dealing with far more intangibles, but that relationship is still there. I mean, you could be in the creative economy, you could be in the digital economy. I mean, the business we invested in, their core asset is cybersecurity knowledge and expertise. But that is what my vision is, that we're able to exchange on fair terms, make a real difference in people's lives through our exchange, and not deal in speculation. Unfortunately, and this is not an Islamic issue per se, but the global economy has become increasingly financialized. What that means is much of the movement of money, the exchange and contract values are determined by financial engineering. If we look at the movement of money, it's not for the buying and selling of goods. A majority of it is for speculation, particularly in the forex markets or foreign exchange. Islamic banking and finance is sector
what are the implications of this financial engineering that you mentioned?
What it means is that, first of all, you can have bubbles that form when suddenly all money is moving into that one direction, which is what happened with the global financial crisis. And you can have stock bubbles, whether it be buying GameStop stock, or it could be, for example, very easily that what happened a few days ago with Donald Trump, basically, perhaps some are arguing it might have been an insider trading job. You crash the market, buy it at low and sell it literally 9.5% higher at the end of the day. You've made your money. So that can happen at a faster scale because money is moving, driven by algorithmic trading increasingly now. But the other part of it is that people are making decisions that are affecting real people's experiences. If we think about futures traders who are betting or shorting cocoa prices in Chicago are affecting cocoa farmers growing cocoa in a small plot of land. They're wondering, I've worked so hard to grow this crop and sell it to market. The market price last year was, to say, $1,000 a kilo. It's now crashed to $200 a kilo, and I had nothing to do with it. That, to me, is not a fairness. And I think we participating in global economy, we need to understand that. And so how we're buying our products, who we're buying it from, and where we're investing our money can have an impact. Mm-hmm. So we can't be oblivious. We made the point earlier that we can't be passive.
Absolutely. Arfah, do you have any thoughts on that around the Islamic economy, the direction we need to take, and also just generally if you have any thoughts on if crypto can enhance that and is a good thing for us to be involved in?
Yeah, I think there's definitely good and bad when it comes to crypto, but also how we kind of think about it and what kind of products and stuff. There's one Islamic tech startup, I can never pronounce it properly, Taekwondo, which is about life insurance, and obviously life insurance.
Based in Saudi, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Again, she'll be speaking at Muslim Techfest, and they literally have just recently launched their new product. And as they were telling me about it, I was like, wow, this is like really incredible. And the story behind it was, hey, my friend actually, her husband passed away, and then there was, we couldn't even get access to the password on her phone, and then it got me thinking about actually that thing of how do we actually look after our community, right? Like when somebody passes away, there's obviously, you go and look after and stuff, but then there's all the other things that happen, especially if it's financial or whatever. And like that is literally enabled by crypto and blockchain kind of technology and how they've gone about kind of structuring that in a halal way. And to me, that's like a really fascinating use case. And actually what I really loved about it, it was kind of beyond the usual Islamic fintechs that I've been seeing. And actually, I think we're in a really exciting period as well, where actually, we're going to start having products kind of for us as Muslims in very different, areas of our life. But I think that then on the flip side, I think the impact part is also broader than us as Muslims. And I think it's about society as a whole. And Iqbal Naseem once kind of we were talking about a startup we know, and he was saying they could have easily made their product about like quitting smoking or something. And he goes, it could have been very like, hey, smoking is not really good in our faith, etc. Quit it. It could have just been very like a targeted product for Muslims, but they thought bigger. they thought about actually how does that actually affect society, addiction, and all of these kind of things, right? And sometimes as Muslims, and it might sound a bit ironic being Muslim Techfest, sometimes we can be very kind of insular in the sense of just thinking just for our community, but not actually thinking about actually how does this how can we use this to solve this problem for society? And I think like even with the Muslim Techfest, like the whole thing is about excellence and ihsan, but actually the byproduct is we want people, the Muslim becomes secondary, not the fact that we're hiding it, but actually people just associate excellence and Muslim in the same sentence, and it's just a byproduct. So I think for me, when you talk about the whole like actually what does that look like, I think for me it's about thinking bigger beyond us as a community as well, and actually how we kind of change society, because there's so many things in our faith, zakat as one of those things, right? Imagine if zakat was just a thing that just happened, everybody had to do it, right? How that would literally eliminate poverty. So actually, what are those things that we can take from our faith or etc. and actually apply to just society in whole, and we improve society and we create as Iqbal Naseem says, a God-centric society.
Yeah. So let's say there's a Muslim woman, she's at home, she wants to leverage tech and AI, and we have like agentic AI, which is becoming talked about every day now. What are some first steps that a Muslim woman who wants to say set up a business and wants to utilize the technology of today, what are some first steps that she can do?
So I think the first thing is really thinking about the problems, right? Like what kind of problem are you solving for, and what are those problems that you could kind of build for? I was building something for my daughter on ChatGPT, and then this is like my crazy entrepreneur. So I was like 11:30 at night, I was like building something, generating some stuff, and then I was like, oh, I could actually turn this into a product. And the first thing I did was I went onto Lovable, and then I started literally just trying to put something together. Then I went to bed and I haven't picked it up since then. But that's literally it, right? Like it was just this like aha moment where I was like building something for my daughter, and I thought actually this would be super useful. And then actually realizing actually other parents probably have the same issue. And there was somebody on my LinkedIn, I can use that as an example. It's going to sound really silly, but in the UK we have the World Book Day, right? And World Book Day comes along and parents get really stressed and they're like, oh my God, I have to find a costume for my kid. And literally using a no-code tool, she just quickly created a tool to be like, my kid has a red T-shirt, they have a black trousers, what character can they be?
Can you give some examples of what no-code tools are there?
Yeah, so no-code tools. So I think one of my favorites is kind of Lovable. It's super, super easy. You literally just pretty much describe what you want to build. An example of that is in Ramadan, again, this might be a bit controversial. I didn't really push it out, but it was just me playing around. It was just, the 99 names of Allah, right? When you're making dua, you match them to kind of certain attributes. And I was just playing around with it, something that I do. I actually delivered a workshop in Ramadan at Ramadan Space on using AI to create to up your duas. And again, always with a thing of always double check and always fact check. But actually, there's tools that can enable that, right? So again, I think just taking that step back, let that be faith-based or whatever. Codes like, tools like Lovable, there's Cursor. If you're a bit more advanced, there's tools like Replit, ChatGPT even, right? Like even within ChatGPT, I started to play around with things and I was like, oh, actually like...
Replit's a good example. Husband-wife team. Amazing.
Muslim as well. Very, very vocal.
It's a bit addictive, I must say.
Yeah.
That tool, gosh, I've sunk many hours in that one.
Right? So I just think and this is it, like, especially when people come to me these days and they're like, oh, I've got an idea, I need a CTO. And I just look at them and I'm like, really? You don't need a CTO. You just need to build something and then you'll attract the right tech talent. I'm not saying you don't need tech talent.
You got to think about what is the tech, like tech sounds exciting, all these tools are exciting, but it's going back to the problems. Like, okay, how can that enable what I really want to achieve?
Yeah.
And then all the things will come in the right timing.
And then you just build. And it's like sometimes it's just about building for fun. And I think actually when you build for fun is eventually when you do actually land on the idea, you'll have that skill set to actually like roll something out. Let that be a SaaS product, let that be a digital product, whatever it is. I know there's so many like mums on my TikTok that like create these digital products on Canva and then sell them for like £5 or whatever, and they've actually got recurring income that kind of comes in. So it doesn't even have to be like super techy, but they're solving solving for a problem, because then there's busy moms who are just like, I don't have time to design this thing on Canva, I'm just going to go buy it, right?
Yeah.
So I think really, like, whoever you are, like, just play around with the tools, and just, like, even if it's just something fun or something silly or whatever it is, because that will give you the confidence. And when you actually land on a proper kind of problem that you think, there could be money in here, or I could do something with it, you already will have that kind of skill set to kind of run with it. Sometimes I say to my co-founder, I go, sometimes, as much as I love doing MTF and all that, sometimes I just want to lock myself in a room and just build. Like, I want to be the builder. Like, I'm enabling this ecosystem and, like, building these builders, but I don't get time to be the builder half the time, right? And sometimes, especially, like I said, right now, when I have all these tools at my disposal, I just sometimes want to be that builder.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one thing, just to kind of echo Arfah's point earlier about that, you don't become an overnight success, and we heard Arfah's amazing story. With a lot of things, when you're trying to build and create a product, all the founders I've come across, the entrepreneurs, business founders that we're investing in as well, it's such a common thread, common story, which is that they had so many iterations of this, and sometimes not even related, but they built something that they can learn from, they can get feedback, and that led them to the path they're at. So I think a lot of people think that's overnight success and it's glorified, and all these stories come in the headlines, or they were very young and they did it. But no, the most common path is that you've gone through that hard work of testing, iterating, painful, killing ideas until you get there. I mean, even in my case with Wholesum, it was really almost a 10-year journey to the point we got to Wholesum, and there was maybe 4 or 5 iterations. So yeah.
What was the most important thing during that period of building the business? What was the one thing which mattered the most, that had the greatest impact?
I think, so I went in with a very solution-focused idea. I wanted to create financial empowerment for businesses and individuals, and I wanted to make a mass market product on day one. And I didn't appreciate, the main, what they call unit economics. So understanding, how is this going to make money? What are the key costs going to be? How do I make it sustainable? And the best advice I got from some of my shareholders and mentors were, focus on one product, focus on one very niche segment until you can prove it, scale it, and then you can take it to a broader audience, because you don't want it to fail, both from a sustainability perspective, but you also don't want your product to be so bad that no one wants it.
Yeah. I mean, the purpose of a startup is the path to finding scalability, right?
Yes, yes. And producing something people really want. You're solving their problem. And that was the best advice I got. And so we made an important pivot in the very sort of first 6 months. Instead of becoming a retail product that would be available for everyone and start investing very small amounts, we became an accredited investor fund. Now, it felt a bit conflicted, because I'm like, that's my mission. I want to make it available to everyone. But if we don't make this successful, and if this becomes another failed Islamic financial institution, we've done more disservice to the community, right? And so now, the fund has been live for 15 months, and I had my first couple of investors now redeem and come out of the fund. And the feedback they said was, your product was great. I made some good returns. I want to come back in 6 or 9 months. That is now showing to me that we're solving a problem and there's validity. And inshallah, we're working towards our next capital raise to think about, how do we now make this more expansive and available? If I hadn't done that, and I launched in 6 months, failed, and it'd be another sort of story that's in the dustbin, and would not be in this position. So I think those hard conversations were necessary early on.
So talking about financial institutions, I think in the UK, Islamic fintech is growing massively. It's one of the major hubs in the world. But as you said, a lot of them are failing, right? What role do you believe, talking about AI, has in growing these financial services, financial institutions, fintech companies?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm going to echo Arfah's point. I think she said a lot of good things, but we're also, I'm taking some of that sort of advice. We didn't go heavy on hiring a CTO, building and spending a lot on tech. In fact, when I spoke to my first customer, they said, look, if you can give us a basic digital product that just does the basics, that's enough. And then from there, you can iterate. So we just took a white label fund administration portal. It was provided by our trustee. It was part of the package that they charged us. So we didn't build any of that. Now, after a year and a half of learning about customers, we're developing an AI tool to help the general public, free of charge, understand basics of personal finance and Islamic finance. So we've built it with scraping 300 websites, and I'm building it with a young sort of developer who's really passionate about trying to get AI tools out, and almost it costing us very little. We're just paying for some design on the landing page. So I think thinking about what the customer needs and what do you really need to build for it and what are low-cost ways of doing it, this technology in the last couple of months really has enabled us to do that. The second thing is that when we are building, we don't need to make it a perfect gold standard. We've just got to figure out, how do I get my customer to go from A to B, which is their biggest pain point. And I think that mindset and the fact that we had a very small pre-seed has forced us to focus really hard on that, so we don't waste a lot of resources. And now, alhamdulillah, we've got to the point where we've got the brand equity, we've got customers who are happy with us, we've got a bit of the financial sustainability, and now I'm really excited because now when I do my next phrase, I'll be like, I know exactly what tech products I want to build, and I can then identify what I really need to build. So I think that's sometimes, and not just in fintech, for any type of entrepreneurship, you don't need to go and build the full house and everything in it. You can often bootstrap with very little. But at the end of the day, and coming back to the topic of spiritual businesses, am I solving a customer's problem? Am I doing it in an honest, ethical way that's making a difference? Because at the end of the day, if I don't have that, and I have all the tech, or I have the fancy office, and I have all the fancy staff members with big titles, it's just not going to last.
I think on the flip side, though, I was having this conversation yesterday with the Islamic fintech founders. On the flip side, especially in the UK, it's very heavily regulated as well, which has actually been the opposite for them in the experience in terms of pushing out quicker, right? As much as I'm banging on about kind of AI and you can just get things out there, I think there are definitely certain industries that have more regulation, and actually that regulation is a good thing, because unfortunately in our Muslim community there have been Ponzi schemes where people have lost money, you know, the uncles at the mosque or whatever it is, etc. Right? They've lost money. They've thought they were investing in a product, and it's just not gone, and the person's disappeared or whatever it is, right? So I think it's also.
Can I just pick up on this? Is for both of you.
Yeah.
What signs should you look out for that you know you're not investing in something fraudulent, something people are going to run away with your money? What are some early signs that are like, oh, I should be careful here?
I think, well, ideally, you should be only really investing in FCA-regulated products. So, like I said, alhamdulillah, especially in the UK, we're quite leading in this scene, and there are lots of Islamic fintech products out there that are FCA-regulated. So I think if they don't literally have that stamp of approval, your money's not protected. So I think that's probably like the number one thing. And two, really try and actually understand exactly how, again, I know this is an education piece, but really try and understand, okay, how are they actually making the returns? How is that money actually, you know, coming back in that stuff? And I think if you can really try and understand those two, I think the FCA regulated thing is just the easiest stamp to really look at, and if it's not, then just don't even bother investigating, right?
I'll add two more things. I mean, that first one's a great point. I mean, we had a $200 million Islamic financing scheme failed just a few months ago in Australia. I had friends who've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars because they thought they were getting into something that was riba free and it's going to be great for the community. The people who are running it were not licensed as a regulated fund, so the equivalent is Australian Securities Investments Commission. They didn't know what they were doing. They were over their head. So the two other things. One is look at the people who are doing it and figure out, and this is not necessarily a hard and fast rule, but it gives you a strong indication. Are they financing and investments experts, and are they also compliance and governance experts? Or they have that talent within their core team? Not advisors, not someone's pretty face and a bio on their website. Are they the ones who are driving the decisions around movement of money? And often, a lot of the Islamic institutions I've come across are people who are generalists. I have institutions who are like, they're teachers, and nothing against teachers, or they might be technology people, or they might be construction people who are trying to run a fund, even in property. Like, a fund management business is very different to being a construction and developer. So in our team, alhamdulillah, all our team are finance and investment experts, and we're trying to focus on that and building that talent internally as well. The second thing I'd say is figure out that the governance of how the money is protected. So, for example, most institutions that are regulated, and sometimes you can get around, the regulations might not always cover that. For example, you can create a cooperative, which is an investment cooperative, and they might not have what's called a separation between the custodian who controls the money and the investment manager who markets the security of the product, and then they allocate the investment decisions. Generally, if you have no idea, the first thing to work out is there an independent custodian of the money? So that means they will be what's called a fiduciary. They'll protect the money. The fund manager, the person who's marketing it, who might be the snake's oil salesperson, they can't touch the money. So in our case, the fund that we have, we have literally no control on a single dollar that comes in and out because we have an independent custodian, and that's required under the Australian Securities Investments Commission regulation. So I can't run away with the money. I actually have the view-only file to the bank account, and every decision we make has to go through their approval. Amazing. So these sorts of things are, I guess, not known in the community, and some of our largest Islamic finance institutions in Australia are actually cooperative structures, which is legally fine. But the question I have is, if they mismanage the money, there is no additional oversight. So I think it's part of our education in letting people know about that. But also, we can't just blame the institutions as a community. And I mean, I've made a couple of these controversial statements today, so I'll make one more just for the sake of it. We train so many Muslim doctors, lawyers, engineers. We're not training enough Islamic finance professionals, not just people who are conversant in the Sharia, but actually understand, how do you do equities research, fundamental analysis to pick a stock pick, fundamental analysis on due diligence of a small business. I mean, we have a full process where we look at the financials, we look at the industry, the work that obviously Harris Irfan and Cordoba Capital Markets are doing. They do primary due diligence on the deals. We don't have enough talent that understand this system and the process.
Let's say right now there's probably parents listening and they're
Yes.
thinking, what field should I encourage my children to
Yes.
go in? Naturally, a doctor, an accountant, that you can kind of see the tangible benefit that you're going to have on people's lives.
Yeah.
Why should a parent or even someone who's a young person think a lot about financial education and upskilling themselves in this regard? What type of impact will that create?
Everything, as we've just spoken about, how organizations can manage their money better. How can we fund entrepreneurs? How do we which is essentially financial intermediation, which is movement of capital between people who've saved it, so people's hard-earned money that they've put aside, and then organizations, institutions, entrepreneurs that need that money. That movement is a big industry, and London is the heart of the financial capital of the world, in a sense, along with New York, Singapore, you would argue, or Hong Kong. So it's all there for the taking. We need the talent who are also values driven to be the entrepreneurs, the financial advisors, the regulators, the compliance people. It's not just all investment managers. There's a whole ecosystem, and obviously tech, because increasingly it's done by tech. We're looking at how we can use AI to speed up and make our financial diligence process even more accurate. So it's not just driven by, oh, I know that person or I know that industry, I'm going to have a bias. Let's actually look at the numbers carefully. So we're going to need a lot of talent. And it's not just in finance investing, but that industry is one of the biggest industries, and that then fuels other industries that are related to it. If you're a school, you're managing multi-million pound budgets. If you're a mosque, you're managing a lot of money. So I would argue that we have a lot of talent in some of these other sectors. We need more talent here.
Yeah, thank you. And Arfah, we heard about Tanvir's journey and the struggles and the path to validate his business. What is one struggle that you've faced, either building Muslamic Makers or building MTF, that really stands out to you?
I think it is the thing that Dr. Tanvir is actually solving for investment, right? I think it's not, especially when you're not a tech business, like even though we're like a festival or whatever, it's still a traditional sense of business. It's very easy to go out and find the VC investment. Everyone wants to invest in tech, But actually, if you're building traditional businesses, let that be you want to open a coffee shop or whatever, etc. I think Muslims are still really struggling to kind of access that kind of capital unless, there's a rich uncle somewhere and you can get a loan for Gardatassin from us or etc. It's still very, very hard. And I think it's changing, like I said, that there's a lot of people building in that space to make capital accessible. So I think we are definitely in a much more better place than we were 5 years ago.
Got it. And what trends are you seeing within the tech space and the finance space? What can people go and research at the moment that may help them on their financial journey, on their journey to understanding tech and potentially growing a tech business and investing? What some broad trends that we're seeing in society at the moment?
Well, I mean, just access to knowledge has become easier. Obviously, you can GPT almost any question you want, and that's why we're building. Our tool is called Tanvir, which is about enlightenment. So we're building that as a web scraper to to bring very simple questions around personal finance, investments, and when we're building a prompt library which has sort of 10 sort of case studies around things like I've just gotten married, I want to go to Hajj, I want to buy a house, I want to start investing and build a portfolio. So we're using those tools to help bring knowledge closer to people and through a structured way, and we're trying to code it in a way that it's also going to be Sharia compliant. Although we haven't got the Sharia compliant, but it's like we're kind of prompting it in a way saying, okay, we're an Islamic scholar, you can only give answers that are Sharia compliant. So I think those sort of access to information is very key. The other thing, of course, is that I think the younger generation are sort of exposed to more tools that makes it easy to access that. So in previously, you could only be like, oh, I'm going to buy a property, or maybe I'll go to a fund manager and might give me access to the stock market. So we've got tools that allow us to invest from very little amounts of money, which means you can enter. The barriers to entry have come down. So I think more of those tools and the Islamic fintechs and other players who are democratizing that access is key. And the third thing is the social element. Arfah talked about the mothers who kind of rotate money around. They're called rotating savings and credit associations, or the committees or shumitis as they call it in Bangla. Those used to be the older generation doing it. What's happened now is people are coming and actually having those conversations. Whenever I deliver a seminar or talk, I find so many young people, so many people who attend those events because they're hungry for that knowledge. So the spaces where people coming together and discussing that has become more social. So no longer will it be a secret world where someone is preying on people's vulnerability to take their money or to invest their money. It's out in the open, and people are learning about it, and they're fact-checking that information. So I think those elements are key, and we need more of those conversation spaces.
And Arfah, your thoughts is maybe specifically within tech?
Yeah, I think for me, it's the younger generation needs to upskill the older generation, and especially with the likes of these kind of AI tools, etc. Because I think there's a massive missing trick there, right? Because if we can actually empower the older generation to it, I think that will really also kind of change the game. Because I think, having that accessible kind of knowledge, the questions, whatever it is, let that be in life. I was like, I downloaded ChatGPT on my mother-in-law's phone, and then I was like, oh, we can train it to be like, oh, what shall I cook today? It sounds silly, right? But it actually, like, these kind of AI tools are ultimately AI assistants, right, for our lives. And actually, if we can empower the older generation, it can help them not just in their personal life, but also let that be financial kind of questions and stuff that they might have, and just kind of empower them as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like a very basic thing is like if someone comes to you with an opportunity, whether it be money or investment rate, you can just ask us some basic questions saying, okay, what is this organization? Is this how it's structured? What should I look for?
I did that recently with our outbuild. Like, not that I have the money for it, but we have space in our garden to build an outbuilding, and I was trying to work out the ROI on it. Yeah. And I was like, what if I put X amount here versus if I had the money and put it in stocks and shares, is it actually worth it? Or the headache of having tenants and all of this stuff. Like, I was literally like workshopping it with ChatGPT to kind of break it down for me in that sense. So I just think, like, I'm very like AI first now. Every little decision, even on my TikTok, I have the videos I make called Everyday AI. Like I just think in such a way, and it's just become like that for me. And actually, I think the more people that can do that, I think that empowerment can, really change the game.
I just want to caution one thing. I've just realized we've been talking a lot about it, but everything that we're saying is all general information, not financial advice. Yeah. But the other side to that is, there is a role for professionals to play in this. And I think I've heard this, and growing up, migrant mentality, what do I need to hire, a plumber or an expert? I mean, we go to doctors for medical advice. We should go to financial advisors for financial advice when it's needed. There is a lot of free information out there, but in some cases, you might save money, and you might save from those risky decisions when you've gone to a professional, just as you wouldn't go and operate on yourself, right? So I think there is a new generation of savvy advisors who are also very clued about what's happening in the world and the trends. They're not giving those old uncle kind of advice, oh yeah, there's a good property opportunity in that suburb. They're thinking about holistic. So I think we should seek those experts out, and we should also train new generation experts and use technology to democratize that aspect. I mean, financial advisors have always been that expensive, something for the uber rich. There are new tools. I mean, the work of, you mentioned Ada Invest, amazing work to democratize investment information and finance for women, and this is doing an amazing job with that. So I think that is also an important part of it, that seeking out the professional advice and not just rely on the TikTok video or whoever at the mosque is saying here's an opportunity into this next stable coin.
So we've established that generating wealth is a good thing, especially if you want to use it for for societal benefit and so on. Let's get practical. Let's say someone has listened to this podcast and they're like, you know what, I have a goal now. I want to generate £1 million or $1 million, but they lack the skills and maybe they lack the contacts to help them get there. They don't have the marketing experience. They maybe have very little experience with tech. What steps should they take if they want to get from, say, 0 to 1 million?
Yeah, no, great question. Wouldn't we all like $1 million or pounds? The thing is, the remarkable thing is, it is possible. So I'm going to give a plug for that book again, but there's a case study there of a janitor in a school in the USA who, when he died, I think it was 80 or 90, again, we're going to fact check the exact age, he left a net worth of about $8 million US. It's a janitor doing a very humble job, very simple, nothing complicated. He wasn't like a finance major, worked in a BlackRock or anything like that. And all he did was he put a bit of his money aside from every paycheck and he invested it into a portfolio of market-linked stocks in the US stock market over a very long period of time. It compounded and compounded and compounded, became over $8 million. And we know of a lot of people who make a lot of money in business in other areas and then they flop or they go bust and they go bankrupt. So I think there's an important wisdom there, which is about building good habits, moderation and consistency, which are prophetic character, aspects of prophetic character. So I want to say that it's not complicated. It's just a matter of getting started with small basic steps and kind of that little bit of a framework I mentioned earlier, which is, again, general advice. Everyone has to think about their own circumstances, building saving habits, putting some aside for an emergency fund, building a diverse portfolio made up of some exchange-traded funds are the easiest way to do it because you're not doing individual stock picks. Honestly, you don't need to do stock picks. Index funds have outperformed active fund managers. So active fund managers are those who are actually saying, I'm going to pick out a stock when it's rising and sell it at the top, and I'm going to sell it before it crashes. Majority of active managers always underperform the market. Index funds have always overperformed. So
just summarize again what an index fund is.
An index fund is a collection of stocks that track the overall market. So if, for example, I can buy an index fund for the S&P 500 or the FTSE, or in Australia, ASX 200, and those collection of stocks essentially are designed, if the market's going up, it's going to go up. If the market goes down, it goes down. And why is that important? Because essentially, if you're at least tracking the market, and if you look at the market over the last 100 years, it has returned many-fold over. Active managers think, okay, I'm going to try and beat the market. So at least I'm going to say I'm better than the market. But over 95%, if I quote the statistics in the book, don't even beat that. So it's very hassle-free. You buy the ETF, which is linked to the index fund or the index, and you don't have to rebalance. This is my wife's doing, and she's doing very well. Literally, she doesn't spend a minute on it.
Is there any Sharia component to it? Muslims have to look for certain funds?
Yes, Islamic. So look up Islamic exchange-traded funds or Islamic index funds. A lot of the major providers provide it. There are some Islamic ones like Wahed. So, look up ones that either meet the currency, the risk, the costs that are suitable for you. Speak to a financial advisor if you need more specific advice. And you can also just invest in a few of them and see which ones work. So that's, and find a broker that can allow you to buy it at a very low cost.
Yep.
So you're not paying a lot on that. So that's one component. The other one is look at a diversification strategy with alternative assets that are not just going to be correlated with the stock market. Because if you're just putting all your eggs into the stock market, then it's going to go yo-yo around like that. If you need to pull it out at the time when you might want to buy a house, you're raising a young kid, you might have other needs. So putting into some other alternatives, obviously, portfolios from Islamic Finance Group. Our fund is doing that kind of thing. There are many others out there. And also putting some into an emergency buffer into an Islamic bank or an Islamic short-term fund. That's really all you can really start to think about. As you get more sophisticated, you might do venture capital investing and be an angel investor to start helping entrepreneurs access capital. You might think about private equity, which are larger, more risky,
We're just
long-term.
about to end the episode. But Arfah, just final question for you. Give the viewers your final piece of advice when it comes to, they've listened to this podcast, they're feeling inspired, now they want to, take some action. What one piece of advice would you give them? Have you got like 15 seconds?
Whatever idea that's sitting on your head, just start. Literally, just start, and that's what all will kind of lead to things.
Yeah, thank you. I think this was an amazing discussion. Arfah, thank you so much. And Dr. Tanvir, really practical insights that I think people can take away, and hopefully we can do this discussion again. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, and learned so much from you, Arfah. Thank you.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. I hope you benefited from this podcast. Please, apply one practical tip that you've learned from this. Investing is really important. Generating wealth is very important. Becoming entrepreneurs is very important. But I hope everyone can move forward with something that they've learned from this and benefit in their life. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.